My name is Birgit Liodden. I am the CEO and founder of the Ocean Opportunity Lab, currently building a global ecosystem and platform for matchmaking ocean and energy entrepreneurs with resources in the established ecosystem. And with me here today to address the future of our blue economy, I have Einar Vik Arset, Coastal Director of the Norwegian Coastal Administration. Welcome.
Thank you.
Of course, I have Kolbjørn.
Thank you.
I have also Pia Meling, Vice President Sales and Marketing of Massterly. And we were supposed to have Roger Hofseth from Hofseth Biocare here today, but he was unfortunately prevented from joining. So, connecting the first and the second keynotes here today, I will focus this panel on the key building blocks from the high-level panel, which we need to succeed in combining: produce, protect, and prosper. Another terminology for this is one used by Laura Storm, founder of Sustainia, author of Regenerative Leadership. We need to look at nature's way of building regenerative ecosystems also in the human and business world. There is a screaming need for holistic ocean spatial planning across the current industry silos with an ecosystem mindset that replicates how nature builds interdependence and symbiosis. In a future where the ocean shall become the new space for providing the world with resources, how can we follow Kolbjørn's mindset and adapt a circular, regenerative mindset where we don't end up with a Wild West scenario as we might see today, and also avoid making the same mistakes that we have done on land? How can we adopt a mindset where we need to regenerate more life and resources into the ocean than the ones that we extract out? So, let's hear from the panel. And Kolbjørn, you represent a truly circular and a new way of thinking business. And when we are moving into a future with more industrialization and production of renewable energy offshore, and we also see the current challenges of today's aquaculture and fish farming, what are the key critical risk factors for the aquaculture industry and life in the ocean when the core needs of breeding spawns and vulnerable critical areas clash with the commercial needs in, for instance, the offshore energy sector?
I think we need to have several thoughts on the mind at the same time. There is the balancing between producing new and clean energy, for instance, from ocean winds. But you also need to avoid to build these constructions in the spawning areas for, let's say, herring and cod. Why should you make a good green initiatives by destroying fishing stocks, etc.? I think the ocean is so big, and there are so many areas that you need to be closely mapping. And I think the conflicts that we've seen in the past with the oil and gas industry, with the seismic shootings in the fishing areas, where fishermen has felt that the oil industry has priority 1, 2, and 3, and the fisherman comes with a hat in their hand and comes to the table when everyone else has left. I think we need to avoid that. We need to have all parties around the table and agree how we do this.
And if we pull from now the current oil industry, if we look at, for instance, Statfjord A as one resource that is now used for extracting oil and gas, instead of removing and making it into spikes, how could you think that we could rethink the kind of next generation ocean industrial activities by building and continuing to use these floating resources and build more ecosystem-based industries that are actually bridging and combining the different sectors and caretaking both the needs and utilizing the opportunities that are represented across the various sectors?
Yeah, basically it represents a great opportunity for the future, simply because, I mean, the damage is already done. I mean, the installation is there, and to prepare for a life after the oil, you should consider, is it possible to use these installations already there and the infrastructure that has been built up to make this into, let's say, wind farms instead of oil installations. I think those are the issues. There are probably a lot of technical obstacles to do that directly, but maybe the incremental investments to make that happen is not that big as starting on a totally new green field and build up from the start.
And luckily, if there's one thing we're really good at here north, is difficult technologies on the offshore shelf. And then, Pia, I saw that you were raising your hand as a comment, but yeah, and I'll let you take that before my original question.
Yeah, I just got this idea now that we're rolling out electrical vessels, battery-driven vessels. Well, couldn't those offshore installations also be a charging point for vessels that are going on battery? If you could do fast charging there in the future. It's just an idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, we're good at floating energy production, storage, etc. So let's just rethink what kind of energy we're producing and storing. And Pia, I'm going to direct a little bit more commercial question for you. Because one thing is, of course, the life below water and the clash between industries. But as long as we don't cap global warming, we will continue to put life in the oceans and our future livelihoods at risk, as well as all the terrible implications from the rising water levels and extreme weather, whether it's the super typhoons hitting Asia, mega wildfires, as in California and Australia, and drought mixed with flooding, destroying our farmlands. We see that the impact is now really coming up close. And operating here up north, we also see a global warming hyperbole, as Arctic glaciers and permafrost is melting rapidly and faster than anywhere else, and releasing methane that only adds to our current human-made emissions. We know that international regulations from the IMO and the global community will be key, but the pace of it is still too slow. And it seems that we can't wait for all countries to agree, yet still we need to get market mechanisms in place that support the front runners and the early movers towards environmental sustainability and zero emission. Do you have any good pragmatic concepts and solutions to accelerate our joint blue-green shift across the axis of the polluter pays principles and the responsibility of both the producers and the consumers?
Of course I do. Well, I think regulation is important, but we, as you mentioned, we don't really have time to wait for IMO to finalize regulations in this area of the polluter pays. We saw that the European Union just introduced, or they added the greenhouse gases from shipping into their carbon market, and that's a good step. But we now see the market forces moving. It was mentioned earlier today from the capital side that, of course, banks and investors are now asking for sustainable investments and putting pressure on companies to deliver real progress. But we also see a really interesting development in terms of cargo owners now. There was Trafigura, a global commodity company, was recently stating a suggestion for IMO, though, for what they call a fee-based system, where you pay more for using a polluting fuel, basically. You calculate the CO2 equivalent. And this is used as a subsidy for the low emission or zero emission fuels. Of course, this is an idea they have for IMO, but I think if more and more companies join these forces, the kind of Getting to Zero coalition has 200 companies now, that's including Maersk and Cargill and Shell and Trafigura, as mentioned. If all the market forces, all the cargo owners start to unite in this kind of effort, that will bring the market further. And I also think if we are able to measure the CO2 footprint per product from production until it reaches the consumer, including the transportation, which is a major part, then the end consumer will also be able to make an informed choice, perhaps pay slightly more for a product that has been shipped in an environmentally friendly way, or wait 2 more weeks to get the product shipped to you. Because today, you order stuff online and you get it the next day. In the US, they have same-day delivery. And you don't need all that stuff that quickly. So I think, me at least, as a consumer, I would like to both pay a bit more and especially wait a bit longer for some of my products to be shipped to me and maybe then be shipped in an environmentally friendly way. And I really believe in the new generation of consumers, that they will make this choice because they are much more concerned about the environment than our generation is. So the market forces is something that I truly believe in, but then we need to be able to measure in a transparent way that actually the industry actors agree on this way of measuring it, and then you could get a level playing field for everybody, and the end consumer will decide.
Yeah, because a huge problem now, of course, is that we see that a lot of the front runners and the key kind of green actors that are really putting and exposing themselves and investing a lot there, they're actually the ones that are also ending up paying extra.
Yeah.
Instead of getting rewarded. And a lot of this has, of course, to do with our legislations and the way that we administer our industries. And that kind of segues well over to Einar. We know that there are, in this very rapidly shifting landscape, there are a lot of barriers and bottlenecks that the innovators are facing. Whether you're putting a salmon farm on land or whether you're putting an autonomous ship without ballast water on the sea, etc. And as per today, while we need this more harmonized way of handling the oceans, we know that both here in Norway and across most other countries, we know that the various parts of the ocean industries and commercialization is very fragmented across government bodies and departments. And how can we resolve this into a more holistic mindset also from the legislators and governmental bodies? And what do you perceive to be key here? And how can the government help facilitate aligning and removing these current bottlenecks so that the industries can move faster when we clearly see that we are already here, we're so eager, we're so ready to change and to drive this, and we are waiting?
Well, it's a huge topic, and it's a global topic as well. First of all, I think we're talking about the blue economy, but it has to be green too, and to make that happen, the public sector has a quite essential role. And now that the coastal areas close to shore, they're pretty much regulated as of today, but then the oceans are not. There's a complex situation there where no one has actually taken a role, not even in Norway, and to lift up the maritime spatial planning of the oceans. I think it's time for that now, and not only the coastal areas close to shore, because we can't risk that the ocean becomes like you said, the Wild West of the oceans. Of course, we're not there today. I don't think we'll be there in the future either. But it's just to underscore that we need to regulate the oceans more strictly and more holistically than we've done so far. And I think the NCA, when we looked into the future, we made a strategy for 2050 recently. And the battle of the oceans is one of those core issues. And a possible consequence of the increased activity in the oceans these days and in the future. So we believe that a more holistic maritime spatial planning is essential, and I believe that the NCA is well suited to take that role, actually, at least on a national level.
And now we see that Pia, she's sitting next to this box over here. It's in Norwegian, but it's, of course, the UN SDG number 17, collaboration for the goals. And of course, the last thing that we really want here is kind of a war or a conflict over the ocean resources, whereas the optimal scenario would be following your model of actually looking at sustainability from various different aspects and rather bring different stakeholders, industry actors, and collaborators across the value chain together to look at where can we actually work together, creating these new floating ecosystem mechanisms. But that also requires holistic regulations. There are a lot of hinders per now that wouldn't allow this kind of circular focus in an easy way.
True, and in your case, and in several other cases, emerging technologies coming up, and there's not any regulations for them, and we need, from the public sector's view, we have to collaborate. We need to coordinate ourselves to make sure that the emerging technologies are put into a proper regulation, and. We have to be clear about our goals from the public sector side so that there's no doubt what's our direction when it comes to make this a prosper development. And we need to be transparent and to tell everyone what the plan is, how we're thinking, and make sure that we are working together. Take a role in removing these barriers and make sure that we are lifting up new technologies to make this a blue and green economy for the oceans.
And then before leaving the word back to Pia, of course, regulations take time, but you also have the options of test bedding, like we've seen in the autonomous space with Trondheim Fjord area, where it's opened up for a test bed area while we are working on regulations. Is that something that we could be better at, as seen from the Norwegian perspective?
I think so. However, I mean, the Nordics are pretty well known internationally for being flexible on the public side too. So, in my opinion, we're pretty shipshape, I would say, and there's a low threshold to establish contact. We just passed a new law that actually makes no restraints on autonomous shipping when it comes to piloting, for instance. So we're up there.
Yeah. Pia?
Yeah, I think those test beds need to be expanded to look into not only like a vessel that is autonomous, but also the port, the automation of the port, and the last mile logistics, the other form of transportation. And this has to be seen together as a whole logistics chain. And somehow we need to test that from A to B, because there's a lot of focus on the sea voyage and the vessel itself, but we need to integrate it into the other, all the players in the whole logistics chain, I think, needs to be one test bed, and then to actually get this collaboration. I just also wanted to add that, if the public sector can learn from the private sector in terms of if you want something to change, you need to incentivize it. So if you want the CEO of a company to change his or her behavior, you change the bonus scheme to include collaborative bonus, or how you have to somehow change the incentives so that people work towards this common goal, because otherwise everybody will look at their own profit and loss book. That's the way it is today. So we of course we can talk about it, but we actually need to change the way also all these public actors are incentivized to work together.
Yes.
Too bad there's no bonus in public sector, but I totally agree with you. And actually, the ports they're coming to the NCA now, and they want us as a stronger partner when it comes to new technology in the future, and to make the logistics onshore going more efficient and more green offshore. So, and because we need to transport the goods that you're producing here or in Belgium or in Holland or wherever in the world, to make it go quick but not quicker than the market needs, like you mentioned, Pia.
And before turning back towards the circular model, Pia, I also wanted to ask you, because one thing is, of course, autonomous ships for the actual kind of practical shipping and logistic purpose, but which role is it that autonomous technology will play in facilitating better mapping and sustainable development and handling of our oceans to avoid this Wild West, which we might not have in Norway, but I think we can say for sure that in some other parts of the world there is actually this Wild West. There is a lack of mapping, monitoring, and handling the extraction of ocean resources.
Yes, so if you look at the land side of the world, everything has been mapped pretty down to details. In the ocean, only 20% has been mapped so far. And of course, that's also because technology has not really allowed that. But now with autonomous underwater vehicles, if you deploy 100 units like that for 10 years, you will map the rest of the 80% that we don't have mapped today. So I think using, of course, autonomous technology and new technology, deploying that into really understanding our ocean is a great source of information that we need to make the right decisions on where to place various offshore structures and so on. And this is just a vast opportunity to grow business in our oceans, but of course in a sustainable way.
And Kolbjørn, back to your circular model. I mean, you made this decision of moving fish farming for various reasons on land. What is it that you see that our industries on and in the oceans would need to think of? And what is it that the authorities would need to look at and resolve in able to do a more circular and sustainable aquaculture and handling of fish and seafood in the water per now?
First of all, the decision of starting to move on land is not necessarily motivated by that the current fish farming in the sea is not sustainable, because it has been ranked quite sustainable, and the fisheries and the seafood sector in total also in recent reports. Yeah. But as I said, doesn't mean that you can make it better. But I think the key driver here is the lack of growth opportunities, and that's where sort of the disposition of the areas along the coast comes in. Because I saw a calculation that all the salmon production in Norway can actually, if you pack it together, you could theoretically make it like 2 to 3 times the main airport at Gardermoen if you pack all together. So there is enough space, but there are so many areas, so many waters along the Norwegian coast that are bound for other purposes, for sailing, for defense, and it seems that it's more and more challenging to bring new farming facilities into the coastal zone plans. And it has been difficult, and it's getting even more difficult and challenging because there are so many stakeholders that has an opinion, and so I think that is limiting even though you had more licenses available, you might not have been able to tap the right locations because they are restricted. So I think the whole society in Norway, from the government or the public side and anyone else, NGOs, etc., has to go in themselves and ask, is this really what we want to do? Do we want to limit the production in sea and encourage that this production will be, let's say, flagged out or put on land? Is that the development they want, or do we want something else? Yeah.
Because what an irony. We are in this time where our governments say that we need to extract more renewable resources from the ocean. And at the same time, we create hinders that stops us, and that has these kind of implications where you actually remove some of the key competitive advantages from a country that has, 6-7 times as much ocean space as we have land space.
Yeah, 7 times. And like I said earlier on, we have quite some regulations along the shore, but out in the ocean there is not much regulation at this point, and it's fragmented. It's a lot of different interests out there, and it needs to be looked into in a very thorough way. And in your case, I mean, I'm quite impressed with with the ability to change business models, because we see quite a bit of that in Norway. We should see more. I'm quite convinced that when it comes to regulations, we just need to collaborate more, like it was mentioned, and make sure that we get across the obstacles, because we have to reorient the established economies from the classic take, make, and dispose to make it a real circular economy. That's not recycling; it's a circular economy where you don't use all the resources that we've been using so far. So it's quite interesting to look into new business models in a green perspective as well.
And this, Pia, I mean, you represent a company that is kind of in between. So we have a very well established in the authorities, and you are kind of in between because you are sort of a startup from two big corporates with centuries of history. And how do you see this this mind shift really for a more collaborative model? Of course, Massterly is a collaborative model to solve problems for a completely new industry growing up now. But how can we nurture that even more?
Yeah, I see a big change from when I started in shipping 20 years back, that shipping companies are also looking even outside their own industry to collaborate. So of course this partnership with Kongsberg Maritime and Wilhelmsen that formed Massterly is a very good example of a technology provider and a shipping and logistics company with the same kind of value sets and same drive towards sustainability, but they're very different ways of working anyway. They go together and they create something new and they challenge each other and learn from each other. But we also see that going beyond the maritime industry, learning from the IT industry, from the aerospace industry, from other and maybe smaller startups as well that have a total different view on the future, that companies, large companies are also opening up now much more to get feedback from other players and the potential customers, of course, that you also involve the customer in your, when you're making a product or service, that you start involving them early when you just have an idea and you develop the product and service together. So I think it's a good change in the maritime industry now. It's challenging because there's so many people you need to collaborate with and be open, to input from. But it's the only way, I think, for us to really make this shift that we need, and especially turn into a green and blue economy.
Yeah. And what we're actually seeing here is that we were moving from these boxes and matrix organizations more into a world where our organizations and way of working is more now turning similar to the spawns and the kelp forests and the coral reefs of the oceans, where all the different species has their function and they have to coexist in a good way for everybody to thrive and live.
And Mr. Winter, the keynote speaker, he mentioned the holistic perspective, and we've talked about it a bit. And we continuously need more knowledge about this, and collecting data and to be able to analyze the data and make it available for everyone, public sectors, private sectors, innovators like you, and that's a big step actually. And the NCA is pretty good at that with the AIS, for instance, where you collect data from all ships in the Arctic and in the North Sea and worldwide with satellites, and to be able to use that data about traffic, about emissions, helps us meet the autonomous world, which is approaching pretty soon. So we're looking forward to it.
It's very good. Any final remarks? Yes, Pia.
So much to say.
Before we round up.
Of course, we need to be careful when introducing new growth areas in the ocean and new technology and so on. But if we are only focusing on the risks of new technology or new energy forms, we are also losing out. So I just want us to remember all that opportunity that we have now to actually turn this economy into a green growth. But we also need to acknowledge there are no perfect solutions. We are discussing hydrogen as a fuel. It's been a lot of questions about that. But there's like 5,000 gas stations that blow up every year in the States. Petrol as a fuel is also risky to a certain extent. There's no risk-free option at all. So we need to compare against a benchmark that is realistic. And we have the same discussion on autonomous ships. We need to compare against what is actually the safety level of today, and we need to be equivalent or better. But there's no perfect solution out there, so we need to find the best, and we need to implement it as soon as possible.
I've been 6 weeks now in full-time in Columbi Salmon, and I met a lot of different sort of stakeholders and providers, and both in Belgium and in Norway. And I think what's really encouraging is that there is so many opportunities, so many and so many open doors. I mean, we have kicked in open doors everywhere when we're talking about our concept, and people say, "Okay, we've been waiting for this." Finally, someone that comes with a solution to the table, all from transporters to feed producers, etc., etc. So the whole value chain is just waiting for this to happen. So I think the society is ready, and it's up to us to go.
Yeah.
I agree. So let's walk the talk. Let's get going.
I agree. So let's make the future, and let's make it blue and green. Thank you so much for today.